In this workshop, we're going to cover how to do a basic laser cutting sample. There's a folder I've allocated all the working files that we're going to use. So for this exercise, we're going to use Inkscape. So if you go to OKU 100 lecture notes, okay, and you can go and grab the information from the laser cutting folder. So if you open up the folder, you'll notice I've given you a link to all the information. So go to the laser cutting template file. You'll find it'll take you to the Teams page. I'll show you on Teams where this is. So the first thing I need to make you aware of is you've got these two SVG files that you need to use, and we're going to use Inkscape to edit these. So select both of these files and you're going to download these files for me. Okay, so once they're downloaded, you can now move these. Okay, so OneDrive, it's going to put it in a zip folder, so just need to extract this information, extract all, and you can extract it to this location just like this. And then you can open this folder and Control X to cut these, to put them somewhere else. In this exercise, I'm going to put them on my desktop. Okay, they should be my desktop now. Great, so I'll move them to the right location. Just remember in downloads, keep your downloads clean. So remember to remove everything in downloads. Okay. Good. So once that's downloaded, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to move the correct folders where we need to work with them. So here are the two files. You'll notice that an SVG by default will open up in Chrome or Edge, but because we have Inkscape installed on our machines, you're literally going to type Inkscape and you're going to open up Inkscape, and then we're going to start working on this file. So it's a very straightforward exercise that we're going to be doing, but all that you need to understand is whatever we draw, you need to allocate a line to. Okay, so that's fine. So I'm going to go and open with. Okay, so Inkscape is opened. Okay, so Inkscape is open. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to go to Open, and I'm going to go to the desktop, and I'm going to find, okay, so desktop. So the first one I need to do is the initial, you need to open this one, and you're going to open this one separately. So open this version. You'll see that it will all be set up for you to continue working. That's great. And then you right click on Inkscape again, and you're going to open up Inkscape again in a new instance. Okay, and we're going to go and say File, Open. But this is what we can use as groups, so we're going to use this one over here, but I'm going to go and say Open. I'm going to find it on my desktop. Okay, so A2. So as a group, you need to put this together on the group page. So this laser cutting A2 is where you're all going to put your laser cutting job on. So each group will be allocated one A2 board, and we're going to fill it up with your laser cutting that we're going to workshop in the class tomorrow. So to access this group, you've noticed I've given you the groups as well. So please go and find the group that you're in so that you can complete this task. Okay, so in essence, we're going to be creating something similar to this. I'll just use this as an example. But in essence, we create, each of you individually, we create your laser cutting job in this laser cutting template that I've provided. Okay, so it'll be the laser cutting initial setup. So it's very straightforward. All you need to do, I'm going to close some of these so we can reopen these so you can see where all of this is stored. I'll leave text. Okay, so basically in this panel over here, if you go to extension, so if you go to layer or object, so here you're going to go to layer and object. If you go fill and stroke, you'll notice that it'll keep adding these to this panel. Okay, so you'll see that sometimes the stuff will appear from different, so just if you're going to add a layer, layers and objects, I'll also switch that on so you can see that as well. Okay, so in essence, all we're going to have is text. I can switch that off for now. I'm going to have fill and stroke, and I'm going to have layer and objects. The layer and objects panel, I'm going to use quite a bit to put the correct information on the correct layer, or you can manage your object. So that's something that we can discuss as well. And then fill and stroke is where we're going to assign the correct information. So before we start, what you need to understand about the laser cutting is there's another team that you can go and join. So please join this team. So use the web app instead. I've provided a link and you can request access to this team. Okay, but it's a public team, so it should allow you just to access this information. Okay, you'll see it'll take you to a Bokunda Pixel Lab General tab. In this General tab, you can learn everything about what services we provide downstairs. So if we go to the top here, you'll see there's a series of links that we can follow. There's a how to pay, there's pricing. Okay, but we're just going to have a look at the Pixel Lab services page. It takes you to a web page in essence. So with the laser cutting, all that you've got to understand is in order to laser cut, your document has to be a PDF and it has to be in a vector format. Okay, so not raster, but vector, and that's what we're going to run through in this tutorial. So for the laser cutters downstairs to cut a line, it needs to be red, and the thickness of the line, or the line weight, has to be less than the amount here, so 0,025. And then if you want to engrave or emboss, you're going to use the blue color, so red, green, blue, and it's going to be the same thickness. Okay, so now that we understand this principle, and just understand that the laser cutter, it cuts, if you measure the cut line, it's 1 mil thick. So just remember, in real terms, you need to provide a buffer if you're going to be cutting a lot of different elements. Okay, so you'll be wasting your time if you don't understand this 1 mil buffer. So just check that when we're doing your drawings, but that's something that I'll talk through in the workshop. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, it's pretty straightforward what we need to deliver. You've all been doing an exercise in class where you've had to use font styles and you've had to do your initials. So you need to use a specific font and you need to generate your initials. So it's pretty straightforward. The first thing I am going to do is I'm going to draw a circle, because I'm going to, as per this example, I'm going to recreate this, but I think it'll be good that you all create a circle where you can put your initials in, and we'll pin that up. So as a rule of thumb, we're going to create a circle, and with your on snap settings, so make sure that your on snap settings are on. Okay, and then you're going to click this arrow and you can see what on snap settings I've enabled. So make sure center's on. So it means if I start drawing my circle, that it'll snap in the center. Now while the circle command is active, you'll see that I've kept the left key down. If I press shift, it'll start moving from the center, and if I press alt, my apologies, control at the same time, you'll notice it will lock the aspect ratio. But it doesn't matter if you do make a mistake, we'll fix that a bit later, but it's important that we work around the center. So we're going to work around the center. So with shift active, and then you're going to press shift and control at the same time, then you'll see it'll expand out from the center proportionally. So I'm just going to finish the command. Now you see it gives me these grips. In the top here, you'll see that I can start using dimensions, and make sure that it's set to millimeters. That's important. And I'm going to type 55 by 55. And then press enter. So there I've got my first bit of line work. Now that I've drawn the circle, this is what we're going to cut away. So this needs to be on a red layer or a red path. Now, because this is a circle currently, we need to go to the path tool and we need to make this object to path. Now, if you go to this command on your left, on this left command panel, you'll see that the first one is select. That's to select and move the object, and you'll see it'll snap back in the middle. Or there's the node edit tool. So I can now edit these nodes individually if I wanted to. I'm not going to do that, so I'm going to leave it as is, but that's where you can go and edit and remove nodes, for example. Okay, we'll get into this in a bit more depth later on, but in essence, just understand that you've got two modes in terms of editing. Okay, in addition to that, in layers, we don't have any layers yet, so I'm just going to add a layer. I'm going to call this layer 1. I'll leave it just like that. You'll notice that this is now a path. If I create another shape, you'll notice that this shape will be a rectangle, and it'll tell me it's rectangle, and it's not on a layer. I'll have to put that on the layer, and I might have to put that on the layer as well. So I'm dragging these onto the layers. If I can switch the layer off, it switches everything off. I don't need the rectangle, so I'm just going to switch that off. But just remember, this is not a path yet because it's still an object. So you need to go to Object to Path, and you'll see it'll become an object. Okay, so rectangle, remove that, delete. So we can just press delete, or you can press delete over here. Okay, so we've got our first bit of line work. All right, so I'm using the select command and I'm selecting the object. Now in fill and stroke, what we need to make sure is there should be no fill, so make sure that this is off. Then in stroke path, this is the color in which it's going to stroke the path color, because this is a path. Now this is important, we need to make sure that it's RGB, so select the correct color scheme. Then because this is cut, I'll need to adjust that to red, and I'll need to take this back. So that code that we saw on the pixel page 25500, just remember you need to copy this color scheme. Okay, so in essence this has become a red line and it's cut. That's great, that's all I need to do, and you can keep saving these codes as well. Okay, but in essence it's showing you down below what color. So these two colors are identical, and you can see it's telling me it's that color there, so I could simply click that color as well. But it's a bit safer to use this rather, because then you know it's the correct color. The last thing that we're going to set is the stroke. Now by default it's set to millimeters, so this is where you can set line widths, for example, or line weights. In essence, to laser cut out of Inkscape, you need to set this to hairline, so you're going to go to hairline. And what's nice about the hairline, if you keep zooming in, you'll see that it's still visible, and you can see it the whole time. Okay, so that's my first object. Now with this path, I can rename this object, so you can double click and you can call this cut. So this is my cut path. So I know if I'm controlling this, that's my cut path. Okay, great. Now the next thing I'm going to do, once I've got my cut path, is I'm going to use the text tool, and I'm going to go and find the text to use. So for this exercise, we're going to use this serif, or we're going to use sans serif. Okay, so it doesn't matter which one you select for this example, just make sure that you go down to the bottom and you select the correct font. So if we go to serif or sans serif, here's sans serif. If you do not see these fonts, if they're not visible in this selection, you might have to go and download these fonts. If you need to download these fonts, we'll cover that in tomorrow's exercise. It's very straightforward. But in essence, here's sans serif and here's serif. It doesn't matter which one you use. Okay, so I'm going to use this text just to show you when I pull this back into the other template file how this works. But in essence, I'm happy with the text that I'm going to use. Now I'm going to use a text box. The next thing I need to do is set my text height to millimeters, and I'm going to keep this at 55 mil. And I can simply start typing. My apologies, that has happened twice. So that's something to be careful of, because that does happen. So let me explain that. So delete that, delete that. So basically get all your settings correct, and then start typing. Okay, so this didn't type because the text box was too small. Okay, that's very interesting. It shouldn't do that. So let's just grab that again, delete that, delete that. So use the text tool, click, and then just start typing. Okay, so click where you want to. Now if you use the selection tool, now this is something you need to understand about this text. You'll have to use this box to kind of control what you see. Okay, so just remember that, and this point is, so with the selection tool, and you select this tool over here, this is where the text starts, this point, and this is how much of the text you see. So just be careful with that, and I'll show you how we move everything again. So with everything selected, make sure it's 55 mil, and we've got the right font. I'm going to make this caps, I'm going to say J. So let's get rid of the text. Okay, so this is very annoying. It's not working as well as I thought it would, and you can see it's created a whole new text object. So J, A, caps lock. So get rid of this object, because I know this is my text object over here. If I use the move tool, I can move it. Be careful not to drag it now because you're going to break the text. You'll see that this will change. So make sure whatever you change, you don't use these tools yet, because technically this is not a path, it's still a bit of text. Okay, so this is going to be my text that's going to be embossed. Okay, so I'm not going to change that. I'm going to go to the text edit tool, jump into the text, so edit the text, and here we can start changing the height of text. Okay, so if I change this to 60, you'll see that the text height will change. 70. So try and use the correct size text to fill in this circle as best as you can. Now that I've got the text to the more or less the same height, and you'll see that the snapping will work because it'll try and snap to the center, I can move this object to the center. I can also click the object twice and rotate it once I've placed it. Okay, so that's an option. Now the problem with this, it's on the incorrect color to emboss. So what we can do is here we can change this. So double click and rename this. Emboss. This is going to be my emboss layer. But remember that this is still text. I need to go to path and I need to object to path. Now this becomes a path, so if I use the node selection tool, I can go and edit this information, which is quite neat. Okay, so I'm going to leave it just like that. Now this emboss layer, this layer over here, I'm going to go and change the fill and stroke of that. So make sure that this is set to hairline. You'll see that it changes here at the bottom, and in stroke paint, you're going to change this to the blue color. Okay, so we're going to change this to blue. So 00255. Okay, so it'll cut the circle out, but it will emboss. It won't cut the J and A out. It will actually burn or score that line into the gray line board. Okay, now that this is a path, I can go to the path tools, and now I've got some options. I can break this apart. And now you'll see that this becomes a series of objects. I might want to regroup those two again, so go to layers and object. So here you can see, and you see this will rename it, so it doesn't matter. We can put these in groups, and I'll explain that as well. So those two objects I want to make one again, so I'm going to go to path, and here I'm going to go and say combine. Okay, so combine, so these become one object again. So if I move that and I move that, they move together. Now one thing I recommend you do is you select both of these, and you right click and you make them a group. So group them, and you'll see that this will give it a name here, and it will show you it's in a folder, meaning it's grouped. So right click on this and you're going to rename this. So double click on the text. I'm going to call this. Okay, so on the emboss layer, I can now control what I see. Okay. Now I can activate and open the group, so I can select this part. So what I can start doing is I can start scaling. Now if you're going to scale this up, you'll notice it loses its ratio that it was what you want to maintain the ratio. So lock that, so if you do scale it, it will scale proportionately. And if you use Control and Shift, you'll see that you can do all kinds of, so just look at the bottom. If you look at the bottom here, it gives you all the different options that you can do. So if you hold Shift, you can scale around the center. So here, try and make this to fit into the circle best as you can. So this is totally up to you. You can also play with the scales over here. So your width and height. So this I can maybe make 60, for example, or I can make that 70. And then on your arrow keys on your keyboard, you can nudge it into the right location. So create your initials the way that you want to, so just as you feel fit, and don't take too long to do this. It's purely just to teach you how to laser cut and what is actually going on in order to laser cut. So you can actually put text over something else like this, for example, or below. So you've got these options, and just remember, while you're selecting objects, you can see what's up and below. You can also do a neat trick where you can minus one object from another, for example. So the J, for example, I want to use it to subtract from the A below. So I'm going to duplicate this layer, and I'm going to switch the one off. Then I'm going to select both of these paths together. Remember, I'm still working in my group, and I go to path, and I can say I can remove them from each other and I can switch this back on, for example. So maybe that's what I'm looking to achieve. Just remember, I'm going to select both of these, or I can go to the emboss. I can literally select the group and move the group. So if I select the group here, now I'm moving the group. Okay. Now if I scale again, make sure that that's locked. Now I can get this to fit. Remember, shift. Okay, because I've got the snap layer on, because that's snapping, I'll switch that off. I have more control. You'll see that I've got a lot more control. So maybe that's another option I'm looking to achieve. Once you've created the file that you're happy with, you can simply save this file, save as, and put your name in front. So just make this JA. Okay, so once you've done that, then as a group, you all get together and you'll need to load in your initials at the right location. And you've been allocated squares here in which you're going to place the circle. Okay, so what you'll do is I'm going to pull in my JA. So from our folder, I literally dragged and drop, and you see now that I can load this and place this within this square provided. Okay, if I use the snap, I can maybe snap these to the layers above. You'll see that this will start snapping to information above. So if I switch on the information here, and you'll see it would have brought in everything. So it comes in as a new layer. It gives it a new layer, so you can even give that your name and edit it there. But provided that everything is set correctly and you go downstairs, this should laser cut. Okay, so you can now use this information and place it in the correct location here for me. Okay, so place this in the correct location. I might provide another template where there's some center lines in the middle. So what I could maybe do is provide another point where we can snap to. Okay, so we can snap to the center. All right, so, but in essence, as long as each one of these squares is filled with the circle, what we're going to laser cut, and follow the dimensions for the cut circle. Everyone's going to use a circle. It's just your initials are going to be different. So each of you are going to design your own initials. Okay, so it has to fit in this. Once this is full, so once this is full of all of the different groups' initials and the different font that they want to use, then all that we simply do is we go to File and we export this. So we're going to go to Export. And you'll see in the export settings over here, you're going to say page, because it's a page that we want to export. We're going to select the folder where we want to, so I'm going to say desktop where I want to put it, and then make sure that you select the right file type, and you're going to call this group, whatever group you're in. Okay, so group 1. Okay, and I'll give you an opportunity to upload these to a team page in class for the laser cutting so that we can print it downstairs. Okay, so group 1, and you simply save this as a PDF. Save. Now you can click export and you'll see that this will export to your desktop. Okay. Let's just go yes. Now on my desktop, you'll see there be a PDF, and if I open that PDF up, you'll notice that the PDF will look like this. And every time you zoom in, this is why it's vector. If you zoom into a vector graphics using a PDF, you'll notice that it never pixelates. It'll keep a smooth line. Okay, so you'll see now whatever is blue will emboss and whatever is red will cut. Okay, and I'll present as an example in class tomorrow.